Why hello there. Today we are going to talk about a book called Pure Color by Sheila Heti. Got this book from the library. This was such a strange and weird book. It reminded me in some ways, there's a book by Italo Calvino, which is an Italian author. There's a book called Cosmocomics. It has kind of that vibe. Like, Cosmocomics is kind of a book about slowly evolving from like the tiniest amoeba-like creature into the bigger cosmos and whatnot. And this kind of had a little bit of that vibe going on with this book. This is a story mainly involving like 3 characters with a few other supplemental characters in it. And the way it's written, it's very strange. It's like looking at the story from an outsider's point of view, but still being consciously in the realm of the main character. And the main character is this woman named Mira. And there are 3 characters in this book that it focuses on, which is Mira's father, and this woman, Annie. It starts out, and it talks about in this book how this is the first draft of the world and of humanity. Like, God created everything, and then like an artist took a step back to observe and acknowledge and look at their artwork, and then just stood there, never to have any more involvement ever again. At least that's what this says as the first draft. So it starts out like that, and it says there's 3 types of people. There's birds, fish, and bears. The birds are of the air. I think they just want to kind of make everyone happy or something along those lines. And then the bear gives their love directly to like 1 or 2 select people in their world. It's very narrow and focused on who they love in their lives. And then there are the fish of plenty. They're not as worried about singular people. They're worried more about the collective whole and that everyone's okay. And there's different attributes that they each have and each characteristic. And I guess Mira, the main character, she's considered to be kind of like a bird, and the woman that she falls in love with is Annie is a fish, and then the father of Mira, who is considered like a bear. So Mira meets Annie when they're in school, and it talks about these other people that she went to school with and how they were going to this American Academy for American Critics, which I believe was to be art critics, which I don't think any of them ended up being art critics, and they all ended up doing different things in their lives. It looks at love and death and emotion and how we react to that, but it's in such a strange and weird way that it's awkward at times to read. This book is like the loose idea of a story with blurred edges and almost, like an artist interpretation. This is an artist interpretation of a book. It's like a painting of a different sort, and it's not a comfortable read. It was very uncomfortable. It was not one that I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to see what's happening next. It was kind of, you are curious to see what's written next and how this goes, because at one point Mira's father passes and she's experiencing just like the grief of that, but it also talks about how at the moment he died his spirit went into her and she felt it and it gave her this overwhelming peace. But then when he died, shortly after, like, she didn't die, but then she sent her spirit into this leaf in a tree. And for a chunk of the book, her and her father's spirit are in this leaf. So this is where it gets weird. And this leaf is by the water, and you see these swans swimming by, and then somehow Annie finds her again, and she's pulled out of this leaf eventually, and then like, okay, she goes back to being a human again. I'm not really sure. That was a bit confusing. Or was it more like metaphorical and she was just sequestered inside herself in her grief with the loss of her father, that she wasn't really in a leaf, but she was inside herself, where she wasn't, talking to other people, or just kind of closed up and closed doors. So I don't really know. I think a lot of it's allegorical or metaphorical, and it was very interesting. I would recommend it if you're looking for something strange and different, that it has topics of love and grief. It's done in such a strange and weird way that it was very creative. It's definitely not a book for everyone. I can definitely see that. And that would be why this book has so many mixed reviews, because I've heard so many mixed things. I picked this book up because there is a booktuber that I love and follow. She's another ray of sunshine in our booktube community, Allison Pages. If you haven't had a chance to check out her channel, she's amazing. So I picked up this book because of her. This was one of her top reads of 2022. I put 2 other books on my list because of her that I'm going to read as well. One of them is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Can't remember the name of the author. And then there's another one, Tomb of Sand. And those were 3 of them that were in her like top books of 2022. I'm looking forward to reading those. But yeah, this book was such a unique, weird, artsy, strange story. Loose interpretation of a story. I did not disenjoy it. I did not love it. I looked at it as you would maybe a piece of art, because it is. The way it's written is art and differently interpreted from any kind of book that you would normally read. Kind of like I said, if anyone's ever read Italo Calvino, Cosmic Comics, it had that kind of vibe as well. It was very interesting and weird, and I am a fan of interesting and weird. So Pure Color, if you're looking for something that's a little out there and different from your normal style of book, you just want to be a little more adventurous in your reading, Pure Color by Sheila Heti was quite the interesting piece of artwork. And if you had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.